It's too hard. You're looking nice over there.
Thank you. I took a good bath today.
You always do. I'm going to
But today I rinsed off 2 times.
see there. See there. Did that fireworks on there too? Ah, we're going to go to your class. Y'all, can you believe it? Let me make a couple of announcements before we get started. I can't believe how fast first of all, the year just moving too fast. It's April and the fourth month of the year. And before we know it, it'll be summertime. You know what happens after Memorial Day. It's the whole year is gone. So I do want to make a couple of announcements and for those who are watching the video that are not with us, take notes. All right, so we are here in week 7. Can you believe it? I'm going to click right here. You do not have a discussion post for this week. Excuse me, I'm going to get my coffee. No discussion post for this week. Why? Because you're going to focus your energy on your historical church figure research paper. So let's talk about that, the historical figure research paper. Oh, also, I'm running my mouth too much. I know some folks had some problems on Sunday with D2L is doing its own thing, and I wanted to extend a couple of dates, excuse me, from the things that were due on Sunday night. I allowed you some time to turn them in on Monday, and if you're still experiencing some issues with D2L, just please let me know. Your historical figure research paper, let's talk about this. One of the key things with church history is that there are so many different people, so many different eras. I mean, we could just focus on medieval church history, or we could have focused on African church history. Oh my goodness, there is so much when it comes to history, right? But one of the things that I want you to do is to hone in on one particular church figure. And so you are going to be able, you can use your textbook, or maybe you just have someone that you like already that you've been reading about, and you can select any historical figure that's mentioned in our text, or even, I should even mention outside of our text, even if it's a historical figure that wasn't mentioned. There are so many, hundreds and hundreds, and this is your opportunity to learn more about them. Here's a list. Tertullian is one of my favorites. You don't have to do him, but Nero, we talked about Nero. We talked about lots of the martyrs like Stephen. I was just listening to a sermon this morning. Dr. Ooh, um, oh my goodness, his name just escapes me, but he's the pastor of Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church in Texas. And it was so interesting in his Bible study, he was talking about church history and the martyrs. And I was like, hey, that's what we've been talking about. You could talk about Martin Luther, Constantine, and the list goes on. List goes on. This is your time to do a biography and to learn a little bit more about some of these individuals. This is a long list, but you don't have to do the individuals on this list. Your paper should be at least 3 pages, double space, please. Make sure you have a clear introduction. Your body will be your paragraphs talking about this person, and perhaps some of you may use like a chronological order as you talk about their biographical sketch, or maybe you just want to break down some of the things that this individual did. I'm really looking forward to reading your papers. Use your textbook to assist you with research. You can also use other sources. Okay, make sure that you add a works cited page. Make sure that you look over your work before you submit it, and make sure that you don't have any grammar or spelling errors. So once again, this is your historical research paper. Please make sure that you do it. It is a chunk of your grade, so please make sure that you complete it, and it is due on Sunday, the 25th. Sunday, the 25th. We are in week 7. And so this will conclude us for week 7. We're going to talk about, that's a typo there. We're going to talk about chapters 11. It says 112, 11 and 12 in just a second. Now, if you give me one more minute, I'm going to, this week 9 is a typo. There is no week 9, so I need to remove that. But I do want to move towards week 8. And why? Because somebody's got a microphone open. Because I just want to warn you about a few things and just let you know when some more due dates are coming up, because we're wrapping it up next week. Week 8 is our last week. You have a discussion post. Okay, here's our PowerPoint for next week. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I did include 2 handouts for you. One is about Crusades, and one is a video about some of the historical Crusades. You'll have a quiz next week. Quiz 3 is due on May 1st. And your final research paper, I didn't get the date in there, will be due on May the 4th, May 4. May 4. Okay. Can't believe we're heading into May. May 2nd is my birthday, y'all. Any questions? Any questions, comments? I know I went to week 8, but I just wanted to warn you and just give you a little heads up. Let me come back to you all. How you doing? Any questions, comments? Awesome, awesome. Yes, I see a hand, Mr. Well.
Yes, I put it in the chat. I wanted to make sure I heard you correctly, because I'm listening while I'm at work. We do not have to select a person on that list.
That's correct. Those are just suggestions. And sometimes students get stuck like, it is a million people, can you tell me? And those are just suggestions of some folks that have been mentioned in our book, but you do not, good question. Everybody, you do not have to use those suggestions that were found on the direction sheet. There are thousands of folks that are associated with church history, and you may have a favorite person or just someone you're like, oh, I've just always wondered about this individual. Okay, and just make sure they're a historical, church figure. All right. All righty. Good to see you all. Let me pull up our lesson for today. Get it open. Yeah, it's gone. Oh, give me 1 minute. I pray that you all had a blessed Easter Resurrection Sunday. Last week, remember we started talking about popes. Yeah, we did. We finished 9 and 10. Okay, I was just making sure we finished 9 and 10 from last week. And your discussion post last week, as I started coming around and grading, was about these disastrous popes. And it was just really interesting to read your discussion post and how you shared about how these popes kind of ruined it for a lot of the folks at that time. And church leadership is so very important, even now. Okay, here we go. Okay. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can see my lesson. Super, thank you, Ms. Duhart. And we are going to cover, can you believe it? We're covering chapters 11 and 12. Like I said, I apologize that we cannot get through the whole book since this is a condensed version. Also, here's my other announcement. I know I was forgetting something. Please make sure that you do your registration for the summer. We have pastoral ministry course for the summer. I'm really excited about that. I believe it starts May 31st. And for the fall, let's get that registration up. We have Old Testament and Intro to Religious Studies. I'm excited about those courses as well. We have about 7 students that are already registered for our summer course, and that is so encouraging. So please make sure that if you If you feel led, if you're interested in joining us for the summer for the pastoral ministry course, please register. If you don't know how to register, if you are stuck, just put it in the chat. And that's right. Please see Miss Duhart. Miss Duhart is, yes, a wonderful student here in our course, but Miss Duhart is also an employee. And Miss Duhart, what's your title again? You got lots of titles.
Executive Director of Enrollment Management and Student Success.
In other words, she does it all and she knows it all. So please make sure that you connect with Ms. Duhart. You can do that right in the chat. And for my students who are watching the video, please send me an email. If you are stuck and you're like, I don't know how to register, we will help you. All right.
Professor,
Yeah.
Eric, I've had this question on my mind for weeks, and especially when we got to the popes. I know Peter was the first pope, right?
He's,
And
go ahead.
is well, I read somewhere that Peter was the first pope, and that those that the succession of popes are supposed to be related to Peter or something like that.
Now I'm not sure.
How did they determine that the next popes would really not have any connection to Peter? They were supposed to be in his lineage or something like that.
Okay, I'm not sure. I can do some more research on that in terms of their being related to Peter. It was interesting. I was doing some research last night and I was looking up kind of what happened with the disciples
Uh-huh.
after, and how in their ministries and things like that. Peter did move on to be called more so like a bishop or so of the church. Um, Now, I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything about they had to be related to him. And perhaps maybe that was something that happened early on.
It was in the
Mm,
first century.
okay. And then as you think over time, as time moves on, and I know he was killed. As time moves on, you're probably wondering, like, what happened to his family? Did he have
Yeah.
children? I'm not really sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question, though. Awesome. Thank you. Awesome scholars. Church history is so deep. There's so much, isn't it? All right, everybody. Last week we were sharing how the church is just moving rapidly to different areas. We talked about how it's moving into Asia, moving into North Africa, moving northward into Germany. And so now, if you have a chance, take a look at the map. Now Christianity is moving to more places like Iceland, Hungary. Um, it's just awesome. Now, once again, y'all, these people did not have cars. What's the movie? Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. They didn't have any of that. And all they had was probably some dependable horses and their 2 feet. And it's just awesome how the church continued to move and to spread despite all of the modern conveniences that we have today, like, internet and social media and books and all kinds of languages. It's just awesome. So anyway, Iceland moves to make Christianity its religion in the year 1000 or so, but the church is still weak. And when we say weak, not a lot of churches and organization there. But I thought that it was really interesting how they said, well, this is going to be our main religion. And if you see right here, here's just a map of Iceland. And if you get a larger map, a larger world map, you guys ever seen Iceland on a big world map? It is up there. Okay. And so you have France moved into Germany, Hungary, Austria areas.
Professor Barry, I was struck when I was doing about the popes that in spite of how disastrous they were, the church continued to grow.
It
There was always a remnant left because they some of them did horrible things. You would think people would have just said, enough, I'm not following that, but they didn't. And so there's something to that, which they had nothing, goes back to Christ saying, I build my church and the very gates of hell should
shall
not
not
prevail
prevail.
against it. And that's what I thought when I was researching the popes. That any other organization they would have destroyed.
That's so true. That is a very good point. And we know that it will never be fully wiped out, never know, because it is built on a solid foundation.
Yes, yes.
Unfortunately, yes, some of the leadership can do some horrible things.
Mhm.
And this leads us right in. Thank you. This leads us right in. That was a good segue, Miss Gloria, talking about the popes. The papacy, Papacy, that's a term that I want you to remember. And this is what we call the office or the authority of the Pope. Now remember, we see popes now more so, um, how do I say this? More so on the Roman Catholic side, not in what we would consider on our side, not so much so in terms of Christianity. So popes nowadays are more so on the Catholic side. Simony, Simony, simony. This is the buying or selling of ecclesiastical church privileges for example, like pardons or some type of benefits. So excuse me, so what was happening is in the church, or popes were behind it as well, excuse me, they would say, okay, well, if you want to be forgiven for this particular sin, you stole some bread, you cheated on your wife or whatever, you're going to have to pay $500 for this quote unquote pardon. And we know that that was incorrect, that was wrong, that was sinful, and you cannot buy your way out of a particular sin or something that you have done. And so, of course, the money was not helping the person, the money was helping leadership. And I'm sure the money went right into their pocket. So we have more changes in the church. More changes are happening in the church. Remember, even now, I keep bringing up this roller coaster ride of church history because that's all it is. We're on a high, we're on a low. We're on a high, we're on a low. And conflicts. If you can't remember anything else, church history is just full of conflicts, and then the church figures out how are we going to respond to the conflict. So we have Clement II, and we have Leo, I believe was that the ninth, attempt to now reform the church. Don't you notice, like almost after maybe every 5 to 10 years in our reading so far, something happens, they're doing good, somebody else comes in leadership, they change it, they leave or they're killed, somebody else comes through and change what the other person did, that works for a couple of years, somebody else, and it's just this up and down type of thing. Hildebrand also made more reforms to the church too. He makes reforms against simony. So he's like, look, y'all, no, we can't be charging people. You can't charge people for what they did wrong. That is incorrect. And he also makes reforms on clergy marriage. At that particular time, popes were not able to marry, and that even brings up a larger discussion that how do I say this, leads into a larger discussion of the Catholic Church, of why popes and priests, even nuns, do not marry. Um, and it brings up a larger conversation of what's the word? When you hinder the person from marrying and they are human and, what are they doing with these urges? And then sometimes, those urges come out in bad, bad, bad ways. All right. We are going to come up and talk about the Crusades. So we're going to talk a little bit, and then I have a helpful video for us that we're going to look at quickly. But Crusades. Now, I want you to look at the time period. This is we're into about the 1000s here. So you have about 1096 to about 1099. We have about 3 or 4 years here where Christians are launching off on these crusades. And what would you say that a crusade is? What would you say a crusade is? Sure.
It's sort of like a missionary trip, but there's a military component to it. I don't know how they're going to well, really they're going to convert. They're not going to just share, they're going to convert. And if you don't like the message and you don't want to convert, they will forcefully convert you. So
okay. Thank you, Gloria. So the Crusades are an attempt to convert or an attempt to spread the gospel. But I want you to notice in the first crusade, actually, let me back up to almost like last week. You guys remember when we were chatting and in our lesson, the Muslims started to move in. So you had this new religion that was gaining speed and gaining popularity. The Muslims were starting to move into Jerusalem. They're starting to take over territory, and it's starting to be popular. Okay, now the Christians are like, oh, look, you're taking over our land, and we don't like it. And they are attempting to recapture Jerusalem, the Holy Land. And let me just kind of pause right here. This is what 2022. That area is still in conflict today. Still in conflict today, and I believe it'll still be in conflict until the Lord comes to get us. But it's interesting how they launched these crusades, and we're going to see what happens. So it was called for Pope Urban II. So he was behind it and said, look, I want y'all to go out there and go and get it back. This was called at another council. So y'all remember these councils last week we talked about, what council we talked about? The first and second councils, right? Didn't we do the councils last week? My memory is shot. I thought we did the council. We did, right, Walter?
Yes, I think it's the Nicene Council.
That's correct. We did. That's right. Okay. And the council, somebody tell me, what is a council?
Where bishops get together to solve problems, or world Christian leaders get together to solve problems.
There you go. And we still see this today, even in our different denominations. We may call it more of a conference or a convention, but the whole point is these leaders are getting together and you have representatives so that we can make laws or solve problems or whatever. And so Pope Urban said, look, I need you to get together and we're going to get this land back. And he called for, as Gloria said, a military expedition. All right, those are the folks on the line that have been in the military. Who's been in the military? I've got some soldier students here. Right. Now, amen, and thank you for your service. My soldier students, when you were sent somewhere, okay, you weren't sent there to sit. What were you sent there to do? When you got your orders with some of my soldiers.
You carry on.
Okay, say it again, Walter. I heard two people at the same time.
Okay, and mine was just to keep the enemy away. You know, that was my mission. That it wasn't my direct mission, but that was the goal. You know, of my job.
Awesome. Thank you, Walter.
So,
And Walter, what branch of service did you serve in?
I was in the Army. Now, this is 45, 50 years ago now. You know, my job was more Air Force job. I was air traffic controller. But I can see the relationship between that and I guess what we were talking about was the Crusades, that every man has to do his portion of the job to accomplish mission. And I believe that's probably the same way with the Crusades, that each person has something to do, but the overall mission was the same.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you for your service as well. My husband retired from the Army. For our students who are or were soldiers, they were sent somewhere to do a mission. And as Walter said, that I'm not there sitting, but we had to fight off or subdue the enemy. Same thing here. So this military expedition, and so military lets us know that they went with some weapons of some sort, right, to fight off the Byzantine Empire, and which had recently lost to Anatolia to these Seljuk Turks, and those are kind of fall under the Muslim group. We're gonna go to this video real quick. If you guys let me set it up, let's see if I can set this up. Okay. Let me set up the video. Let's see, it's not coming up that way. Let me set it up another way here. Let me just cut and paste the browser. Just stand by, I'm coming right back. Okay, and so this particular video let's see if I can control click. There we go. All right, I'm coming back to you. I'm going to share this video, and it says the Crusades in 5 minutes, because I want to make sure that you understand. Let me get my computer sound. What they were up against. All right, give me a thumbs up if you can see this on the screen. It's kind of blurry. Okay.
The Crusades were military campaigns waged by Western European Christians during the Middle Ages for the defense and expansion of Christendom. What made a crusade distinct was that warriors involved in the fighting received spiritual merit, usually a plenary indulgence granted by the Pope. A crusade was considered by Western European Christians to be a holy act, an act of sacrifice and piety for the love of Christ. 4 centuries before the beginning of the Crusades, the first Muslim armies swept out of Arabia to conquer Palestine, Syria, Mesopotamia, Egypt, North Africa, and Spain, some 2/3 of the Christian world. Between the 7th and 11th centuries, Christians fought wars against Muslims to prevent them from making further conquests into Christian territory, or to reconquer what had already been captured. In Spain, Christian kingdoms waged wars to recapture their homeland from the Arabs, while the Byzantine Empire in the east was engaged in centuries of war with the Muslims for control of Anatolia and other regions. In the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks, recent converts to Islam, swept through Syria and Palestine. In 1071, they defeated the Byzantines at the Battle of Manzikert, conquering almost all of Anatolia. In response, Pope Urban II called the First Crusade, asking knights.
Okay, this is where we are in our discussion. Pope Urban II calls for the First Crusade.
From all over Europe to band together and push back the Seljuks. Over the 12th and 13th centuries, the popes called more crusades to the Holy Land and also called for crusades in Spain to help push back the Muslim powers. Crusades against Muslims were not called with the intention of converting them to Christianity. Rather, they were called to regain control of territory that had been previously Christian but had fallen to Muslim armies. Jerusalem had been conquered by the Muslims in 637 and was considered particularly important to Western Christians since it was the site of Christ's crucifixion. Indeed, Jerusalem was revered as the holiest site in the Christian cosmos, and it was particularly important to Western Europeans that it be brought again under Christian rule. When in the 11th century, news arrived that Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem were being harassed and killed by the Seljuk Turks, this fact alone inspired many knights to join the First Crusade. Although the Crusades were called to reclaim lands, greed was not a primary motivation. Professor Jonathan Riley Smith, the world's foremost expert on Crusades history, has proven that crusading was incredibly dangerous and expensive, and that virtually none of the knights who went could expect to gain wealth. Indeed, they often bankrupted themselves crusading. The primary motivation for crusading was spiritual, with the knights joining because they believed that they were doing God's work by fighting to protect Christian pilgrims and to reclaim holy sites like Jerusalem, and that involving themselves in a crusade would win them spiritual merit. The Crusades to the Holy Land saw many failures but also many successes. The First Crusade and the Third Crusade, for example, were both very successful, though ultimately later, at the close of the 13th century, the last Crusader holdings in Syria and Palestine would be captured by the Muslim Mamluk Empire. However, the Crusades in Spain achieved lasting victory, with the whole of Spain being ultimately recaptured by the Christians. Later crusades would also be called against the Ottoman Turks, such as the Crusade of Lepanto in 1571. If you want to learn more about the Crusades, subscribe to this channel.
All right, let's come back to you.
So they really didn't care about if they were converted or not. They were just going to get the land back.
So some good point. Some crusades, so let's talk about that. Some crusades were to convert.
Okay.
Some crusades were, remember what the gentleman said? I want to get my land back.
In the back.
I want to get this territory back. So let's talk. I'm sorry, Miss Carolyn, I saw your hand. I'm gonna let you jump right on in there. Let's talk a little bit about what we just learned, especially when Christians feel that, wait a minute, Jerusalem is our territory. That's what, Jesus was there, and you're gonna come in and and take over our territory. They were feeling some kind of way. Carolyn, go ahead. I saw you.
No, that was by mistake. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was by mistake. But I do agree with you what you were saying about the land of Jerusalem, and I'm gonna piggyback off this. Although they were crusading for the land, especially in Jerusalem and other areas, but that was also the way they were able to convert, to keep believing in their Christ and believe and push forward. The land to them was sacred. So the sacred land, like Jerusalem, meant just as much to them as converting. It was converting to them. They didn't want to lose it.
Sacred land. I typed that in the chat. Very good.
Yes.
So it's like this. Imagine you and your family have, Ms. Duhar said the land was as important as the law. Yes, it was. Yes. Imagine you and your family, and this is probably true for many of us, you and your family have maybe your parents, your grandparents passed down some land. Okay, you have land. My dad and his sisters had land where they grew up in South Carolina, and the land was passed down passed to my mom when my dad passed. But imagine someone just comes onto your land You paying taxes on this land, and you got the deed to this land and all of this, and somebody just comes and start moving on your land. You're gonna feel some kind of way about that, right? You're like,
Definitely.
in it, definitely. So we going down now, modern times, right? We would go down to the courthouse. Right. Ms. Duhart said that's war. We're going down to the courthouse. We're saying, wait a minute, no, I have papers on this land. You got to get this person or these people on out. This is our family's land. Mr. Lee said, yes, the Holy Land is still in dispute today. Yes, it is. The actual, the physical, I mean, the land, the places itself, the dirt is still in dispute today. And just like I say, it'll be in dispute until Jesus comes back. One of the things about I was writing my notes about Crusades. Did you hear the voiceover say it was about greed? It was about
Mhm.
going, getting territory, but the more territory I have, I can do more things there. I can have businesses and, and I can move and I can build there. It was about money, but it was also, was it safe?
No,
No.
no, no. One of the words I want to, maybe we can use that describes this is called eminent domain. That is what we talk about now. We didn't, we say eminent domain now, but back then we were when the land was taken, it was called a crusade. So same laws, traditions, um, spiritual gathering, family land, like you just spoke about, all of that. So we're in it today as we were then, called
Sure.
eminent domain.
Yes, that's a really good point. And I know this is taking us off, but I'd hate to see that. And you see it so much, especially in Atlanta, y'all, where you just driving and they want to make a new development. They want to make a new shopping center. And what do you call it? Amazon. Um, the industrial places.
Uh-huh.
We warehouses, and you see all these warehouses popping up. And where houses used to be, or it could be an old little house, and all of a sudden I looked up and I said, look at that little house. They were tearing down somebody's little house, eminent domain. Well, of course, they give them this money or whatever, but it's never going to be your, maybe that house, they raised their children or something in that house, and now it's for Amazon. All right. I saw a message in the chat before we go back. This is from Ms. Duhart, and even today, the official land is in dispute, but most people do not know that the Roman Catholic Church owns most of the holy spaces. Thank you for that. Very good. Very good. All right, let's get back to our lesson. Y'all doing really good with this discussion today. Let's see. So Crusades, when we get back to Crusades didn't always work out the way they thought it was. So we have these Crusades going, but just as our soldiers can share with us, our soldier students, that unfortunately, maybe they had some soldier brothers or sisters who did not make it back, and so many of these crusades were very brutal. Many Jews and Muslims were killed, excuse me, in the process of these crusades. Okay. We talked a little bit in the video, we won't go to this video, but we talked a little bit in the video about the Second Crusade. And the Second Crusade happened about 1147 to about 1149 or so. And this Second Crusade was pretty major because it was launched from Europe, and it was seen as more of a Catholic holy war. Remember in the video, they talked about the main thing was either one, we're getting territory back, and that territory that they were getting back was not from other Christians, it was from the Muslims. And so this particular war was against Islam. The armies of the two kings marched separately across Europe, and after crossing the Byzantine territory into Anatolia, both of the armies were separately defeated by the Turks, and that's the Islam folks. And so that war didn't work out very well. Okay. So many times when they go off on these crusades, and I always want to wonder in the back of my head, did Jesus tell you to do that? You know, that's another conversation. You know, when they go off on these crusades and they are attempting to gain back land or attempting to push off the Muslims, many times these crusades were not successful. All right, so we talked about the first, the second crusade. Now let's talk about the third crusade. The third crusade was about 1189 to 1192. So this lets you know that the church is not giving up. They keep moving. This was an attempt by the leaders of 3 of the most powerful states in the West. So Western Christianity is jumping on it. So this is England and France and what they call the Holy Roman Empire. And they said, look, we're going to try to go back and get Jerusalem, the Holy Land. And they're going to try to get that back from the Muslims, okay? Because it was being ruled and inhabited by Muslim people at that particular time. We're going to come back to this. We're going to come back to this video. But I wanted you to understand there's another crusade. So we had a first, we had a second, and a third. There's also, next week, we're going to talk about, there was a children's crusade. Let me see if I can find that. Okay. Hold on one second. Okay, so let's go back. We're going to talk about the third. Get this up here right. Okay. All right, coming right back to you with the third. All right, here I go. Let's see if you can see this. Uh-oh, no. Let me make sure I'm sharing the sound, okay? There we go. Okay, prayerfully, you should be able to see my video. Okay, we're going to start here and then we will chat.
Discussions of the Third Crusade in our pop culture often seem to conclude that the expedition was a failure because it did not recapture Jerusalem. And yet, historians frequently disagree with this assessment. Thomas Madden says, the Third Crusade was, by almost any measure, a highly successful expedition. Jonathan Riley Smith wrote that the Third Crusade's achievements were outstanding. Andrew Ehrenkritz concludes that the Treaty of Ramla, which ended the Third Crusade, must be regarded as a humiliating concession the Christian invaders imposed on Islam. So which is it? Was the Third Crusade a success or a failure? The Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem was much larger than the city of Jerusalem itself. It included hinterland castles like Kerak and Montreal, inland cities like Ramla and Tiberias, and a network of coastal cities like Acre, Caesarea, and Jaffa. After the Battle of Hattin in 1187, Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Damascus, conquered virtually all of this. In response to this devastation of the Crusader kingdom, Pope Gregory VIII called the Third Crusade. When Richard the Lionheart, the primary leader of the Third Crusade, arrived in Palestine with his army in 1191, he found the kingdom of Jerusalem, as it existed prior to Saladin's conquests, all but lost. Only the port city of Tyre remained in Christian hands. But Richard began to reverse many of Saladin's important gains. Acre, the wealthiest and largest port city, was reconquered by the Christians. Next, Richard defeated Saladin at the Battle of Arsuf, re-establishing Crusader control of much of the coast and allowing the Christians to reoccupy Jaffa, the port city nearest to Jerusalem. At this point, Richard made 2 military demonstrations toward Jerusalem, though he never actually attempted to recapture the city. Richard's navy allowed him to dominate the coast and keep his army well supplied, but Jerusalem lay far inland, where Saladin had the advantage. Therefore, Richard determined that Jerusalem was not a viable military target at this time. The holy city of Jerusalem was the spiritual fixation of the crusade. The fact that Richard was unable to capture it was a disappointment to the Christian world. But does this mean that the Third Crusade was a failure? In fact, the Third Crusade succeeded in several important ways. As mentioned earlier, Saladin had essentially captured the whole of the kingdom, but Richard's conquests re-established Crusader control of some of the most important territory in Palestine. Saladin attempted to reverse this situation, besieging Jaffa in 1192, but Richard repulsed this attack, defeating Saladin soundly at the Battle of Jaffa. Prior to the Third Crusade, Saladin had been poised to exterminate the Crusader presence in Palestine. But by the end of the Third Crusade, he was forced to recognize Richard's conquests in the Treaty of Ramla. Saladin's servant and biographer, Baha ad-Din, tells us that Saladin was very unhappy about this treaty. "Our enemy will grow strong now that they have retained these lands," the Sultan lamented. We can see then how the Third Crusade was a reverse for Saladin, since he lost control of the economically important Palestinian coast. And although the Third Crusade did not regain Jerusalem, it did regain Acre, Jaffa, and other coastal cities. So overall, it was a net positive for the Christians. In addition to the territory he reclaimed from Saladin, Richard also captured the island of Cyprus off the coast of Syria for the Crusaders. Cyprus was both economically and strategically important, and its addition to Crusader territory was one of the most significant achievements of the Third Crusade. We can see then why historians tend to judge the Third Crusade as overall a success for the Christians.
All right, let's come back together one more time. Now, let's chat a little bit more about these crusades, specifically the third. I was taking notes too. I hope you were taking notes. Now, sometimes when we see in history that, okay, their point going out was we want to get the land and get it back. Okay, that was their whole point. But when we see that, well, you didn't do it, as the voiceover artist said, well, that was a failure. But now he helps us to see that maybe not so much a failure. Certain things still happen for Christian history that was good. Do you guys remember anything that worked in their favor? Even though they didn't get hold of Jerusalem, which is the Holy Land, what could have worked in their favor? Okay, so what worked in favor of the Christian army or those Christian crusaders in the Third Crusade? Remember any that might have been a thumbs up?
They recaptured several of the major port cities. Jaffa and Acre, I think.
Jaffa, Acre. And I'll type it in here in Jaffa. I thought that was big. And so if you remember on the map, there were a few port cities right along the coast, but Jerusalem was inward. And those of us, we know port cities are, come on, what can you do in a port city?
Supply armies.
Say it again, soldier.
You can supply your armies.
You can supply your armies.
You can receive supplies.
Receive supplies, right. The ships can come in. port cities were a place where you could have trade. I'm from I guess you could call it a port city. We have a port. I'm from Baltimore, and a lot of those port cities, they have lots of businesses in that area. That's what they're known for. Anything and food and things like that. And if they can grow things around that water, right, then they could take it inland to another area that it maybe can't grow that particular type of crop because they don't have that water supply like the port city does. Very good. So a port city, and I heard the minds of the soldiers working here, they're like, wait a minute, the port city is important because that's a place of protection. You know, we can supply the armies that way. We can get our things in. And I know I'm going to the other side, but if you think about attacks that happen to the United States, right? If a particular attack happened, it didn't happen in Chicago. It didn't happen in the heartland. It happened at a port area, right? Because that was the first place that they could reach. Think about Hawaii just laying out there, December 7th. You know. Okay. All right. What else happened? I took some notes here. What else happened that could have been a plus for the Third Crusade for Christians, even though they didn't get the Holy City. So we got some port cities.
We got Cyprus.
Yes, I wrote that down. They took hold of Palestine and Cyprus.
Yes.
Cyprus. And here was a plus too, that if you can hit the enemy in the pocket in terms of economics, okay, so that happened towards the end of that video. The Muslim leader, and I'm forgetting his name, but he took an economic hit. So if I can't sell my goods, if I'm losing money, that's a definite plus for the other side, because the more money they have, they can, they can get more artillery and all these other things. But if you hit them in the pocket, that'll definitely be a plus for the other side. Okay. All right, let's pause right here. It's 11:55. Any questions, comments? All right, so we remember Crusades. Let me see if y'all remember Crusades. What's the point of a crusade?
Attempt to convert or spread the gospel.
Primarily is to take the land.
To convert, to take the land.
And to take the land.
So either it has multiple reasons. We're either going to go and convert folks, or we're going to go and get some land back. Territorial. Very good. We saw multiple. We only talked about 3 crusades, but there were so many crusades that were launched. Next week, we're going to talk about a children's crusade that was even launched. And you would just think like, okay, children are going off on a crusade, but it wasn't as bad as you think. So we'll talk about that next week. But I want you to make sure that you focus on your historical research paper. You may have found some people today that are like, I want to find out more about some of these individuals that we talked about. And our book was not going to give you a whole biography on them. It's just a snippet, but this will be your opportunity to learn more about them. Any questions, comments that you may have for me? All right. And let me get here. Gloria Walter. All right, forgot to take my roll. And thank you to those who are watching the video as well. Well, I hope that you all continue to have a good day, and we will see you next week.
Bye, Professor.
Yes.